they can, because a democracy won't survive unless you have a two-party system.
For days, the story surrounding Rob Reiner's death has been wrapped in uncertainty, whispers, and unanswered questions. Now, that silence has been broken, and what's come out is far more disturbing than anyone expected. Official documents have finally been released, offering the first concrete explanation of what really happened inside the Reiner household. But instead of clarity bringing comfort, it has only intensified the sense of shock. And as more pieces slowly come together, the full weight of this tragedy is only beginning to surface. The risk that paid off. Rob Reiner was born on March 6, 1947, in the Bronx, New York, into a world already steeped in comedy and creativity. His father was Carl Reiner, the legendary mind behind The Dick Van Dyke Show, so expectations came built in. From the very beginning, Rob was surrounded by writers, performers, and the rhythm of show business. That influence took hold early. Rob eventually made his way to UCLA Film School, where he sharpened his skills and started figuring out his own voice. By the late 1960s, he was already showing up on television, landing guest roles on popular shows like The Andy Griffith Show, Batman, and The Beverly Hillbillies. It was clear he was finding his footing. His transition to film came in 1967, and he kept it close to home. Rob made his big screen debut in his father's movie, Enter Laughing. He followed that with a role in Halls of Anger in 1969, then reunited with Carl Reiner once again for Where's Papa a year later. But even as his acting career grew, Rob was quietly expanding his skill set. Inspired by his father, he began moving into comedy writing, earning a spot on the writing staff of the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour, where he worked alongside a rising comedian named Steve Martin. Still, the role that changed everything came in 1971. Rob was cast as Michael Meathead Stivic on All in the Family, a character that would define an era of television. The show ran until 1979, and Rob appeared for the first 8 seasons, starring opposite Sally Struthers as his on-screen wife, Gloria. All in the Family was unlike anything else on TV at the time. It didn't shy away from uncomfortable conversations. Through the constant clashes between Michael and his father-in-law, Archie Bunker, the show tackled racism, sexism, homophobia, abortion, and the Vietnam War head-on. Those debates were raw, messy, and often hilarious, and they made the sitcom one of the most influential in television history. Not every idea presented in the series holds up perfectly today, but its impact is undeniable. It was one of the first mainstream shows willing to confront controversial topics directly, and it changed what audiences expected from a sitcom. The show didn't become a hit overnight. Its first season took time to catch on, but once it did, it exploded. All in the Family climbed to the top of the ratings and stayed there for years. Its success was so massive that it spawned 5 spin-offs, though Rob never appeared in any of them. Within the story, Michael Stivic was written as an orphan whose parents had died in a car accident. He and Gloria lived with her parents, Archie and Edith Bunker, creating one of the most famous household dynamics in TV history. Michael and Archie were in constant conflict, but Michael shared a warmer bond with Edith, who often tried to keep the peace while still standing by her husband. That tension was the engine of the show. Archie represented old-school tradition and rigid thinking, while Michael embodied the progressive ideals of the 1960s. He became a voice for changing social values, though the series avoided diving too deeply into the darker edges of that cultural shift. Michael wasn't portrayed as perfect either. Despite his ideals, he had plenty of flaws, which made the character feel human. The nickname Meathead became one of the show's most memorable running jokes. A flashback revealed that Archie himself had once been called Meathead as a kid, and he passed the insult down to Michael as both tradition and a jab at his intelligence. When the spin-off Gloria was being developed, Rob chose not to return. To explain his absence, the writers had Michael abandon his family to join a hippie commune, effectively closing the door on the character. Rob left All in the Family after its 8th season and never came back. even as the franchise expanded with shows like Archie Bunker's Place, Maude, and The Jeffersons. After stepping away, Rob continued acting, but it quickly became clear that his true calling was behind the camera. Following in his father's footsteps, he shifted his focus to directing, and the results were remarkable. His directorial debut came in 1984 with This Is Spinal Tap, a mockumentary that followed a fictional rock band and went on to become one of the most beloved cult comedies ever made. It was a bold, confident start. 2 years later, he directed Stand By Me, a coming-of-age film based on a Stephen King story and starring Will Wheaton, River Phoenix, and Corey Feldman. The film showed a completely different side of his talent and confirmed that he wasn't a one-note director. Then came a run that few filmmakers can match. In 1987, he delivered The Princess Bride, a fantasy comedy that would become a timeless classic. In 1989, he followed it up with When Harry Met Sally, one of the most iconic romantic comedies ever made. That year turned out to be pivotal for more reasons than just career success. It was during the making of When Harry Met Sally that Rob Reiner met the woman who would become his lifelong partner, marking a personal turning point to match his professional peak. The love story you never knew. Rob Reiner first crossed paths with Michelle Singer while he was deep into making his 1989 classic, When Harry Met Sally. At that stage of his life, Reiner had been single for about 10 years. He had divorced his first wife, the late Penny Marshall, after a decade of marriage, and during that time, he had adopted her daughter, Tracy. Personally and emotionally, he was very much in the same place as the character he was helping bring to life on screen. And here's where things get really interesting. Reiner later explained that the original plan for When Harry Met Sally didn't actually include a fairy tale ending. Harry and Sally were not supposed to end up together. For rom-com fans, that idea feels almost unthinkable now. The turning point came late in the production. Most of the movie had already been filmed when Reiner noticed a woman on set who immediately caught his attention. Meeting Michelle Singer changed something for him. Suddenly, the idea of love working out didn't feel theoretical anymore. It felt real. That real-life spark quietly reshaped how he saw the story he was telling. At the same time, writer Nora Ephron had been crafting Harry as a reflection of Reiner himself, a recently divorced man trying to make sense of relationships. Life started mirroring art in ways no one could have planned. Before Michelle officially entered his life, Reiner even toyed with the idea of calling a famous actress he'd seen on a magazine cover, thinking it might be worth a shot. That plan was shut down immediately by his director of photography, Barry Sonnenfeld, who insisted Reiner's future lay elsewhere. Sonnenfeld was convinced Reiner would end up marrying his friend, Michelle Singer. That prediction turned out to be spot on. When Reiner and Michelle finally connected, the chemistry was instant and undeniable. It didn't just change his personal life, it changed the movie. The ending was rewritten. Harry and Sally were given their happily ever after because Reiner had found his own. Reiner and Michelle married in 1989, the same year the film was released. Together, they built a family, welcoming their son Jake in 1991. Followed by Nick, and later their daughter Romy in 1997. By 1999, their relationship had become something quietly iconic. A photo shoot for W magazine inside their California home captured them exactly as they were, comfortable, playful, and deeply connected. Photographer Michael Mundy later recalled how natural the experience felt. Because he knew them through a mutual friend, there was no tension, no performative posing. What showed up in the photos was simply the truth. Mundy noticed how easily they laughed together, how Reiner constantly made Michelle smile, and how the affection between them felt effortless. From behind the camera, it was clear this was a couple completely at ease in each other's presence. Michelle's gaze, the way she looked at Rob, spoke volumes, not just about love between partners, but about the family they had created together. Over the years, that bond only grew stronger. After more than 2 decades of marriage, Reiner reflected that the real secret wasn't complicated at all. Over time, love deepens into friendship. You grow together. You become best friends. He even joked that Michelle helped raise him. Those close to the couple saw the same thing. Colleagues described Michelle as Reiner's foundation, the steady force that kept everything grounded. She was the strength of the family, the center that held it all together. Others echoed that sentiment, noting that while Reiner grew up surrounded by Hollywood legends, Michelle came from a more grounded, real-world place. That balance made all the difference. They shared the same sense of humor and a love for laughter, but Michelle's straightforward, no-nonsense nature allowed her to step into Reiner's world without being swallowed by it. She anchored him. In the end, their story wasn't about fame or fairy tales. It was about genuinely enjoying each other's company. As Reiner later summed it up, it all came down to friendship, a quiet home turned crime scene. On December 14, 2025, the film world was shaken by devastating news. Legendary filmmaker Rob Reiner and his wife, photographer and producer Michelle Singer Reiner, were found dead inside their Brentwood home in Los Angeles. Both had suffered multiple sharp force injuries, marking a violent and heartbreaking end to two lives deeply woven into Hollywood and public service. The discovery unfolded in a deeply tragic way. That afternoon, a massage therapist arrived at the Reiner home for a scheduled appointment. When no one responded at the front gate, the therapist contacted the couple's daughter, Romy. Sensing something was wrong, Romy rushed over with her roommate but entered the house alone. Inside, she found her father. The shock was overwhelming. Romy immediately ran back outside, distraught and unable to process what she had just seen. At that point, she had not yet discovered her mother. Her roommate was the one who called 911. When paramedics arrived and entered the home, they later informed Romy that Michelle had also been found dead. Early reports suggested both victims had their throats slit. Investigators later confirmed that Rob and Michelle suffered stab wounds to their necks, along with multiple other injuries across their bodies. One particularly chilling detail emerged from the early moments of the investigation. Sources allege Romy urged responding officers to look closely at a specific relative, describing that person as dangerous. According to TMZ, Rob and Michelle had likely been dead for several hours before Romy arrived at the house. An LAPD spokesperson later told the Post that detectives from the Robbery Homicide Division were immediately assigned to the case, a unit reserved only for the city's most serious and high-profile investigations. By that point, the quiet Brentwood Street had transformed into a full crime scene. The area in front of the home was blocked off as detectives moved in and out of the residence throughout the day. Paramedics had first arrived around 3:40 p.m., followed shortly by police, after what officials referred to as an ambulance death investigation, a protocol used when firefighters determine a death has occurred and law enforcement must step in. The shock rippled far beyond the neighborhood. The family later confirmed the deaths in a statement to Variety, calling the loss almost impossible to comprehend and saying they were still trying to wrap their heads around the tragedy. As the investigation moved forward, law enforcement revealed a troubling development. Attention had shifted to the couple's 32-year-old son, screenwriter Nick Reiner, who was officially named a person of interest. Shadows of Nick's troubled past. In the days following the tragedy, people began looking back at Nick Reiner's behavior, and one word kept coming up again and again: abnormal. Small moments that once seemed ordinary suddenly felt loaded with meaning. About 2 weeks earlier, an employee at a Sinclair gas station in Brentwood noticed something was off. Nick was a familiar face there. He'd been stopping by for years, usually relaxed, talkative, easy to recognize. But this time was different. He looked drained. He barely spoke. He bought a pack of cigarettes and left without his usual small talk. The worker later said Nick didn't appear intoxicated or high, just distant, like something heavy was sitting on him. That detail hit harder once it became clear how well the staff knew him. One employee said he'd known Nick for 15 years. These weren't strangers misreading a moment. These were people who noticed a real shift. Then came the surveillance footage. Video obtained by the New York Post showed the 32-year-old screenwriter calmly walking past a gas station just blocks from his parents' home late Saturday night. He was dressed casually, wearing jeans and a long-sleeve shirt, a backpack slung over his shoulder. The timestamp placed him heading away from Rob and Michelle Reiner's estate shortly before midnight. According to the Los Angeles County District Attorney, That sighting occurred just hours before his parents were found brutally stabbed to death early Sunday morning. The image is chilling in its simplicity. A quiet neighborhood, a familiar street, Nick walking calmly through the night, unaware or perhaps burdened by what was about to unfold. Nick Reiner's past adds another complicated layer to the story. He was the writer behind the film Being Charlie, but long before that, he had been fighting a deeply personal war with addiction and violent outbursts. For years, he was trapped in a cycle of substance abuse that repeatedly pulled him under. He never hid from that history. Nick spoke openly about how bad things became, including long stretches where he had no stable place to live. He described drifting from state to state, spending nights and even weeks on the streets. It was a brutal existence, one marked by instability and desperation. That struggle led to multiple stints in rehab, and even then, recovery never followed a straight line. Through it all, Rob Reiner watched his son battle demons he couldn't simply fix. When Being Charlie was released, Rob spoke candidly about that pain. He explained that recovery doesn't have an end point. The reasons people turn to drugs or alcohol don't magically disappear. They stay with you. You wrestle with them for life. The goal isn't a perfect ending. It's learning how to live with those struggles without letting them win. Nick's relationship with his father was deeply complicated. They collaborated on Being Charlie in 2015, a film rooted in Nick's real-life experiences. On paper, it sounded like a healing opportunity. In reality, it exposed old wounds. According to insiders, Nick carried deep resentment toward his father. Living in Rob Reiner's shadow was never easy, especially with a legendary grandfather like Carl Reiner looming just behind him. Sources claimed Nick struggled with insecurity, constantly comparing himself to men whose careers defined generations of entertainment. The tension didn't stop with Rob. Nick's relationships with his siblings were reportedly volatile as well. One source said his behavior over the years deeply affected the family, especially his sister Romy, who was said to be traumatized by the chaos. Watching her parents repeatedly endure heartbreak over Nick took an emotional toll on her and reshaped the family dynamic. Those close to Rob and Michelle have long said they did everything they possibly could to help their son. Their lives, in many ways, became defined by that effort. Being Charlie was supposed to be a turning point. Rob directed the film, while Nick co-wrote it alongside Matt Elisofan. Both writers pulled from personal experience, shaping a story about a young man struggling with addiction while living in the shadow of a famous father. Nick insisted the story wasn't his life, but admitted that time spent in rehab gave him no shortage of material to draw from. Behind the scenes, the collaboration was tense. Rob later described the process as complicated, explaining that reliving those years through the film reopened old wounds. Reports surfaced of heated arguments between father and son, sometimes unfolding right in front of cast and crew. Stunt performer Eric O'Day witnessed that tension firsthand. He recalled arriving on set only to walk straight into a full-blown confrontation between Rob and Nick. The argument wasn't private. It was raw, loud, and uncomfortable. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. O'Day felt Nick came across as entitled, while Rob seemed exhausted and worn down. From his perspective, Nick pushed every one of his father's buttons, leaving Rob unable to do anything right in his son's eyes. Even so, O'Day said it was obvious that Rob loved his son. After all, he was making this movie for him. The conflict eventually cooled, and the two appeared to reconcile, at least on the surface. But the tension lingered. O'Day said it only took one day on set to feel how strained their relationship really was. Nick later claimed the film brought him closer to his father, but sources connected to the production told a very different story. They said the project, meant to heal old wounds, only deepened them. Instead of repairing the relationship, working together seemed to amplify everything that was already broken. Nick's destructive patterns revealed. Long before the violence that would take Rob and Michelle Reiner's lives, those close to the family say Nick Reiner had already been living with serious mental illness. He had reportedly been diagnosed with schizophrenia, and sources claim the medications he was taking at the time were causing him to behave in ways described as erratic and dangerous. Looking back, people who knew Nick as a child say the warning signs were always there. He was the kid who needed constant attention. As a young boy, he was known for throwing intense fits. As he got older, those outbursts escalated into punching walls and destroying property, including smashing a television and a lamp during one episode. Family insiders described him as extremely hyper and emotionally unstable. He needed to be monitored constantly because his behavior could change without warning. His rants were frequent and exhausting, often draining everyone in the house. Over time, the family learned to walk on eggshells around him. Michelle Reiner was known to quietly warn people not to upset him. Slowly, the household adapted around Nick. Family members and even staff began catering to his moods just to keep things calm. The unspoken rule became simple: give him what he wants and avoid setting him off. Nick's siblings, Jake and Romy, tried to help however they could. Even when they were young, they were pulled into the role of managing his energy, keeping him distracted, and trying to prevent situations from spiraling out of control. Years later, Nick spoke openly about one of his darkest moments on the Dopey podcast. He described a drug-fueled rage in which he completely destroyed his parents' guest house. At the time, he was staying there while high on meth, isolated from the main house. He said he had been awake for days, using stimulants and spiraling further out of control. Eventually, something snapped. He started swinging at everything around him. First the television, then the lamp, then whatever else was within reach. The guest house was left wrecked. Nick admitted there was no logic behind it. He wasn't thinking. He was running on adrenaline and anger after being told he could no longer stay. According to TMZ, Nick had been under psychiatric care in the weeks leading up to the killings. Sources said his behavior had become increasingly alarming. About a month before the tragedy, doctors reportedly changed his medication, and that adjustment appeared to make things worse. Those close to the situation claim he became completely unstable, and doctors were still trying to find the right balance when everything fell apart. Nick had recently been receiving treatment at a high-end Los Angeles rehab facility that focused on both addiction and mental health. His substance abuse was said to be intensifying the symptoms of his schizophrenia, creating a volatile and unpredictable mix. Schizophrenia, as defined by the American Psychiatric Association, is a chronic brain disorder marked by delusions, hallucinations, disorganized thinking, and difficulty functioning day to day. For Nick, those symptoms were reportedly compounded by heavy drug use. Sources say his behavior had been spiraling long before his arrest. He was prone to aggressive, drug-fueled outbursts, and his parents were nearing the end of their ability to manage the situation. He had been living in their guest house, but insiders described it as anything but stable. It was a revolving door of meth binges, sleepless nights, and violent explosions. One source described Nick as a ticking time bomb. He allegedly punched holes through bathroom walls and destroyed the guest house multiple times. Eventually, Rob and Michelle gave him an ultimatum: take medication and get clean, or move out for good. Instead of calming things down, that ultimatum led to more conflict. During one argument, Nick reportedly threatened his sister Romy after she confronted him. From there, things escalated rapidly. What disturbed those close to the family most was Nick's reaction afterward. Sources claim Rob and Michelle considered calling the police on several occasions, but never went through with it. After these violent episodes, Nick would allegedly laugh about them and brag that he could get away with anything. He appeared unfazed by the damage he caused or the fear he left behind. Despite multiple trips to rehab, his lifestyle reportedly remained unchanged. Insiders say he continued taking money from his parents to fund drugs and sex workers. He talked openly about these behaviors in recovery meetings at first, but eventually stopped attending altogether, dismissing the recovery community as cult-like. Then came the night before everything unraveled. According to a source who spoke with the New York Post, Nick had a major blow-up with his parents at Conan O'Brien's Christmas party. Nick had not originally been invited. Reports say Rob and Michelle were uneasy about leaving him alone and asked Conan if their son could accompany them. By that point, Nick's behavior had reportedly been escalating for weeks. His parents were hesitant to leave him unsupervised at their Brentwood home, where he was living under what they described as watchful supervision. At the party, things quickly went sideways. Nick reportedly made guests uncomfortable by repeatedly asking them the same strange questions: their first name, their last name, and whether they were famous. An especially awkward moment involved Bill Hader. According to reports, Nick interrupted a private conversation Hader was having. When Hader politely explained he was in the middle of something, Nick allegedly stood silently, staring at him before storming away. Several guests reportedly felt uneasy enough to consider calling the police. One insider said Nick and Rob got into a loud, intense argument that alarmed people in the room. Conan O'Brien reportedly stepped in, refusing to involve law enforcement and attempting to calm the situation himself. Another source said guests weren't just annoyed, they were genuinely afraid. There was serious discussion about whether Nick needed to be placed on a psychiatric hold because of how unstable he seemed. Those who knew Nick growing up have long described him as intense and egocentric, with endless energy and severe behavioral issues. According to reports, much of his anger was directed squarely at his parents. What makes the story even more chilling is what Rob Reiner reportedly said afterward. Following the blow-up at the party, Rob allegedly confided to close friends that he was terrified his own son might hurt him. At a gathering held days later, guests were left in tears when an A-list attendee shared what Rob had said that night, that he was afraid of Nick and believed his son was capable of harming him. The next day, Rob and Michelle Reiner were found dead in their home. Later that night, everything took a grim turn. Nick was arrested near downtown Los Angeles after investigators tracked him down following what authorities described as crucial evidence. Reports say he had checked into a hotel in Santa Monica around 4 a.m., but bloody evidence allegedly left behind pointed police directly to him. Not long after, he was taken into custody in connection with the killings of his parents. By Tuesday, the case escalated quickly. After a press hearing, the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office formally charged Nick with 2 counts of first-degree murder. District Attorney Nathan Hochman explained that the charges carry a special circumstance because they involve multiple victims. Prosecutors also added a special allegation that Nick personally used a dangerous and deadly weapon, identified as a knife. Hochman made it clear that the potential punishment is severe. If convicted, Nick could face life in prison without the possibility of parole or even the death penalty. For now, prosecutors have not decided whether they will seek capital punishment. Hochman said that decision will take into account the wishes and feelings of the surviving family members. Nick was initially booked at Parker Center Jail before being transferred to the Twin Towers Correctional Facility in downtown Los Angeles. A spokesperson for the Sheriff's Department confirmed that he is being held there without bail. The LAPD later issued a public statement on December 15th, confirming that Nick was responsible for the deaths and would remain in custody with no bond. As the news spread, an outpouring of grief flooded social media, with fans and members of the public offering condolences to the Reiner family, especially Rob and Michelle's daughter. On Romy Reiner's Instagram, the heartbreak was especially visible. Just weeks before the tragedy, she had shared moments from what would unknowingly become her parents' final family vacation. On November 30th, 2025, she posted candid clips of herself swimming in the ocean with her father, smiling and relaxed. The following day, she shared another collection of photos, this time featuring both parents enjoying peaceful moments by the water. At the time, there was no sign that these images would soon take on such painful meaning. In the days after their deaths, Rob and Michelle Reiner's surviving children, Jake and Romy, released a joint statement through page 6. In it, they described an overwhelming level of grief, saying the pain they were experiencing was beyond words. They called the loss of their parents horrific and devastating, something no family should ever have to endure. They spoke about the closeness they shared, explaining that Rob and Michelle were not only their parents, but also their best friends. Jake and Romy expressed deep gratitude for the support they had received from friends, loved ones, and strangers alike. As they tried to process the tragedy, they asked for privacy and compassion, urging the public to avoid speculation and instead focus on remembering their parents for the lives they lived and the love they gave. One detail stood out to many readers. In the entire statement, Jake and Romy did not mention their brother. Meanwhile, Nick remains in custody under strict conditions. Since his arrest, he has been held in solitary confinement and placed on constant suicide watch. According to a law enforcement source, he is required to wear a suicide prevention smock at all times while housed at the Twin Towers facility. The jail itself is known as the largest mental health detention center in the country, but it has also drawn criticism in recent years. Reports have described harsh and unsanitary conditions, including rodent infestations and cells soaked with urine. Nick made his first court appearance just days after being charged. Inside the courtroom, the mood was heavy. He appeared disheveled and expressionless, staring straight ahead without reacting. He was shackled at the hands and feet and remained dressed in the anti-suicide smock throughout the hearing. He spoke only briefly. When the judge asked if he understood and agreed to waive his right to a speedy arraignment, Nick answered with just a few words, confirming that he did. Outside the courthouse, his attorney addressed the media. He announced that Nick's formal arraignment is scheduled for January 7th and urged the public not to rush to judgment. He described the case as deeply complex and extremely serious. When that January court date arrives, Nick is expected to enter a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. If prosecutors move forward with a standard trial and secure a conviction, the consequences would be severe. Nick could spend the rest of his life in prison without parole or potentially face the death penalty. For now, the final decision on that remains unresolved. Rob Reiner's Autopsy was just released, and it's worse than we thought. There are now official answers surrounding the deaths of Rob and Michelle Reiner, and they only deepen the tragedy. The Los Angeles County Medical Examiner's Office has released its findings, confirming that the legendary director and his wife both died from multiple sharp force injuries. Even more grim, the manner of death for both has been formally ruled a homicide. That confirmation came just hours after their son, Nick Reiner, appeared in court for the first time since the killings. During that appearance, his legal representative, Jackson, addressed the situation head-on, making it clear how heavy and serious the moment truly is. Jackson acknowledged the scale of the loss, stressing that the Reiner family has been struck by an unimaginable tragedy. He emphasized that everyone involved understands the gravity of what has happened and that the family is at the center of profound grief. He also pointed out that the case itself is layered with complex and serious issues. According to Jackson, these matters require careful review and thoughtful examination before any conclusions can responsibly be made. In closing, he urged both the public and the media to exercise restraint. He asked that the legal process be allowed to unfold as it is meant to, without speculation or rushed judgments. His message was clear. This is a moment that calls for dignity, patience, and respect for the process and, above all, for the Reiner family.